Welcome to the Victorious Living Podcast. You're about to hear real stories of real people who have discovered the real hope of Jesus Christ. I'm Christy Overton Johnson, the founder and publisher of Victorious Living magazine. Since 2011, I've had the privilege of sharing the most amazing life stories. I never cease to be amazed at the life-transforming power of Jesus Christ. Today in our podcast, you're going to go deeper into these amazing God stories and hear from those who have overcome incredible odds and discover how they found a life of freedom. You can discover it too. I trust that you'll enjoy today's conversation between our host and our special guest. Thank you for listening, and be sure to share the hope you hear and the mission of Victorious Living.
Welcome back to the Victorious Living Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke, on the mic with Josh Rogister. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
It's super exciting to have you here on the Victorious Living Podcast. Your story was in the latest issue, and it was super impactful. You speak about how we serve a God who still does miracles to this day. And I loved reading about your story and just how it tied in your spiritual life, but also your mental health and things that you couldn't control. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. I've had an experience like that in my life. So I was definitely, my curiosity was piqued. I'd never heard about what you had walked through, which I'm sure you never had either. So why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about what you went through in high school that kind of just snuck up on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So around when I was about 15 years old, started having these weird kind of outbursts. And it was very interesting because they came on all of a sudden. I'd always been kind of in perfect health. I was playing basketball at the time. Everything was great. But what ended up catching me was actually I had an infection from strep throat that spread throughout my blood. And it was called Pandas disease. And it's a very debated disease. It's a disease that some doctors don't even see as realistic, and other doctors take it very seriously, especially with how new it was when I was going through it. Going through a lot there. And as it spreads throughout the body, you just start seeing some different things like motor cognition breakdown, or physical tics such as hand squeezing, kicking out your leg. And then if it gets to a certain point, you can start hearing different things from inflammation in the brain that cause you to hear sounds, voices that aren't there. So that was a situation I was looking at that snuck up on me very quickly and developed all within the course of about 3-4 months.
Wow. Were you terrified?
Oh, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
to say the least. To be honest, it felt more like an internal war than an external war. You're not really sitting there contemplating it a lot outside of just inside your mind. You're constantly fighting either a voice that you're hearing or trying to figure out why you're having an outburst.
Yeah, it's exhausting. What year was this?
Ooh, so when I was 15 years old, sophomore year of high school. I graduated in 2019. So that would be looking at it 16, 17.
17, yeah. And I asked this because I know that when the pandemic hit in 2020, obviously it was different, like as far as what you went through, but there are some similarities to people just having like complete mental breakdowns, or COVID gave them things that were just like wild or whatever it was. And it's so crazy that our chemistry, our brain chemistry, and the things that we go through with like disease can completely rearrange your brain in a sense. And I've been through something very similar, but again, different as far as the diagnosis. But you sit there and go, I've gone my whole life not living like this and not having a brain like this. So then you start to like, and I don't know about you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know like as a Christian, it was like, okay, is this demonic? Did I open myself up to something I shouldn't have? Do I need to be rebuking something? And you just start to like, what in the world is going on? And so when you finally get an answer like you did, and then you meet doctors that take it serious instead of being like, oh, please, like, you're just 15 or you're just this, or it's just a growth spurt, or it's just a hormone shift, which I've been told that before too. And you're like, okay, so I'm crazy because of my hormones. Like you can't rationalize it. Right. And so I definitely resonated with that in your story. I know a lot of people who are listening can as well. So tell us a little bit about that journey and then what led you up to going to that camp.
Yeah. So where do you start there? To even say this, it is kind of an amazing testimony of how incredible God is that we have such complex minds. You think all this DNA, this long string, billions upon billions of bits of information, and it's all hand knit by God. So
Yeah.
what a cool thought to even start from the Christian perspective. And absolutely, your first thought is, oh, there's something I'm doing wrong. Like
Yep.
there is something demonic. Like I'm stuck in something, and you play that game for a very long time,
Dark.
especially when you're trying, especially when doctors, and they, not necessarily saying that validation is needed in any sense, but when it's kind of turned in a way that maybe you don't get the diagnosis you're hoping for, or medicines aren't really working, and you start crying out to God, you are trying to beg and be like, Lord, what did I do? What did I do?
Yeah.
When really it is just the Lord building you up, and you're experiencing this attack from the enemy, whether it's just a physical disease or whether it has to do with something demonic. But all of a sudden, as you're experiencing it, you're realizing that God is using it.
Yeah.
And so I battled with it for a good while, and would say that I kind of got into some habits that helped me try to fight it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Coping.
if,
Yeah.
yeah, coping in a way. Like I would say things to myself over and over, or I would look for Bible verses that confirmed, like, hey, you're a believer, like you're not abandoned.
Yeah,
Um,
right, right.
yeah,
Because it's
yeah,
easy to go there. And, I had a counselor tell me this, and this helped me a lot. And those who are listening that might be walking through something similar or a different diagnosis, thinking you've gone off the deep end in your faith, is she's like, we live in a broken, fallen world where there's tornadoes and there's cancer and there's miscarriages. So not every single thing that you're going through is the enemy clicking a button, right? We live
yep,
in the result of sin in a fallen world. So to think that every single, it's not to negate the attacks that we have, but every single thing that you go through that isn't necessarily holy in our minds isn't just a direct attack, And so that helped me a lot, because anytime I had like an intrusive thought, I was like, I'm at dinner with the devil. Like what is going on,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
that's the only rationale that you can have, when you view things in an extreme like that. And again, when you do get more of a clinical diagnosis, instead of, again, not to say that there's not spiritual warfare, because there
yeah,
is,
yeah,
but I was told by a doctor that I was just going through spiritual warfare. And I was like, so that just made me go even further, like into this, like, what? And so when you do get a more clinical, diagnosis, obviously the Lord wants to heal us of those things, but it kind of helps you, like you said, cope. And it helps you go, okay, there's something like going on in my body. And now
yeah,
I can cling to the truth about where my salvation and where my faith comes from, because it's not contingent on what my body's doing or my mind's doing. It has everything to do with what he's done
yeah.
for me on the cross, right? So it kind of helps you build that testimony and that faith. Didn't mean to cut you off. Just wanted to add a
Oh
little bit
no,
in there.
no, you are absolutely okay.
Yeah.
And I will definitely say this: the one, we give the enemy way too much credit,
Yeah.
and so like you say, like not everything is that hit the button. But two, definitely the voices were the hardest part for me.
Yeah.
As I walked up, kind of getting into that small group that I talk about in the story a little bit, and how important they were to the whole process, and the friends that helped me push through for that time. But the voices were the hardest part, absolutely, because most of them were all focused on the God aspect of life. Like they didn't talk about anything else other than harming and God. Like it
Yep.
truly,
Yep.
that's how it was. And there were two that were so similar that I would always have to deal with. And so once again, you kind of play in that side of what am I actually experiencing. And I had this incredible small group um, through the church I was at the time that really helped me get through it. And that's actually the church I went to this camp with. And so
Okay.
that leads us up there.
Wow. Okay. So then you're at the camp, and your story in the magazine says that there was a designated nap time, which is funny because
Yes.
I fought nap time as a kid. And then when I got older, I was like, oh, nap time sounds really nice right now. So what happened during nap time?
Yeah. So, so nap time was scheduled. It was actually during the
Awesome.
4th of July week. That was when our camp was. So everybody's exhausted. We were having like 4th of
Yeah.
July fun, all this stuff. July 5th comes, and middle of the day, we take this nap. We got like 40 guys in the cabin. There were like 500 kids all in total at this camp. And I remember waking up in a panic. I had actually the leader of that small group was helping me through a lot of the things that I was struggling with. Um, And so what ends up happening is when I wake up, I feel this extreme urge to just get out of the room. There's a bit of a panic there.
Yeah.
And so I wake Dylan up, and he helps actually walk me down. He said, there'll be a free space no one will be at. And it was down at the worship tent. And so we get down there with the only two people in there. He actually leaves me some space. I was in one corner of that big worship tent, and he was in the other. And I just started praying. I had been seeking God really hard at that point because of obviously all the panic, going from
Yeah.
a normal kid to what I was dealing with. Uh, and I just remember a couple minutes into it, like all the voices cutting off. And I remember how incredible of a time that was because all of a sudden you're panicking. You're sitting there like, what in the world? Where'd
Yeah.
all the where'd all the things that talk all day? Where'd they go? And I remember it's really pretty light coming from the middle of my eyes and going upward, and that's when I got the real piece of what was happening. I know in the story I write it in there what I truly believe I audibly heard from God,
Yeah. Of
and
course.
gentle and and very authoritarian. I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes sense. It's really
No,
hard
I
to
know what you
describe.
mean, where it's not like condemning authority. It's like authority of like whatever's coming against you is going to stop. And I've
Yeah,
heard that it taught like the wrath of God is aimed at what comes against his beloved. And
yeah,
so when you have that authority, like you want that, right? Like you want a father to come to your rescue and be like, no more, we're done. Because what's going on is hurting who I love. So I know exactly what you mean, where it was like gentle and peaceful, but also like,
oh, this ain't a
fine.
weak. It's not a weak God at all.
No, it's
No,
not. He's not a little
no,
squirrely, you know.
no.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and
So you
so
heard the voice of the Lord, and then what?
yeah, hearing that phrase, "Son, I did not forget you. Get up and never be the same." Like that meant everything. That stuck by. I've been kind of fortunate enough to in dreams, just being asleep, hearing it again. Just having different spiritual dreams, and it's always very deep and very personal. I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah.
But I remember the light closing inward because it started this way and came up, and then when it closed inward, and I remember, I remember, freaking out because it didn't have any symptoms anymore. You're sitting there like, "Where's the voices? Where's all this?" So you start testing things.
Yeah.
You start
Yes.
grabbing, you start writing, you start trying to run and jump and all this. And I tell Dylan, and Dylan's super excited. He's all about the physical miracles. He's all about,
Yeah.
he loves it. And at that
But you're
same
also like,
time,
is this just a momentary thing? Like, is it going to be back tomorrow? Like, even though like you believe the
absolutely,
Lord can do it, you're still just kind of like, is my mind like playing tricks on me a little bit? Even though the experience is still there and it's very real, but you also can be kind of like, because you've
yeah,
never been there before.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
The coolest confirmation though was my sister coming down later that night and finding me at the night service, and I wrote about that in the story where she told me during the same nap time, everything same day, she had this dream that we were walking together in a big city, which we ended up believing to be Charlotte because she moved to Charlotte and we got to like live that out, just completely healthy. Everything's good. We were older, uh, and so it's just been really cool to see the faithfulness of God, where all of a sudden a dream for her and a moment for me has become this long outstanding promise that the Lord has done that hopefully I can use to tell people about Him. And so
Yeah,
that's where
absolutely.
that's that day.
I love that so much. It's so redeeming and so beautiful. And also the thing I love the most about the Lord, one of the things I love the most about the Lord is how much when you're going through experiences in your life and it's not the cookie cutter, I wake up, I go to church, life's good, I made the soccer team, I did, the mundane things. It's you experience the face of God like when you're facing the hardest things. And it's insane because these hard things do not last forever. Like it seems like they will, right? Like
Yeah,
and I believe it's First Peter 5 where he talks about like your momentary suffering, the Lord will restore you and establish you, and thinking about that. And like when Peter is talking about like the enemy prowling around like a roaring lion, and he's like, stand firm in your faith, because after you've suffered a little while, the Lord himself will
yeah,
restore, establish, and strengthen you. And Peter can confidently say that because Jesus literally said to Peter, hey, Satan is asked to sift you like wheat. And he
yeah,
did.
yeah,
And he went through that. And so Peter in his letter can confidently say, hey, it's only a little while. And once it's done, this is what the Lord does for you. And so again, your story is not for nothing. And you are not the only, and praise God that you're not the only one that has experienced miracles and being set free, but you're also not the only one that's walking through those things. And so the fact that you can stand, firm in your testimony of who God has been to you personally, and is going to continue to entice people into the intimacy of Christ, more so than if everything was okay all the time, more so than, if you didn't have that testimony and those experiences. And I love that. And so fast forward, what are you up to now?
Oh, yeah, what we're up to now. So I have officially been in youth ministry for about 2 years now. And so I've worked with two different churches, and I've had a great time doing that. And I get to work with students, but just being a youth minister and being there for the kids and running all the youth groups and community service. And it is a true blessing to get to be in vocational ministry. Um, and that's what I get to do on a day-to-day basis. It is my full-time work. I've graduated college,
Oh,
and
nice.
so I started on to that, and I'm just super excited. I love the opportunities that the Lord has laid out, and I believe from all the sickness, the Lord has given a vision for the future
Yep.
on what I should do in this vocational ministry area and how to use those things. But so much of it is about Him,
Yeah.
and so figuring out like this is not a job, it's nothing like that, but it is serving the kingdom, spreading, advancing the gospel, helping all the believers and being around them. And it's not always just about youth, it's about helping parents and helping congregation and helping staff. It's a really fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say? So this next generation that's coming up, we all have had troubles in each generation of our lives, but the generation coming up definitely is like the mind and isolation and mental
Yeah.
health. And I mean, it's pretty daunting. So how do you feel like you have been able to bridge the gap between, obviously you're healed and you're whole and, you have a testimony to stand on. And then when you come across somebody that is mentally dark and maybe they're going, is there something wrong with me? Is there a demon nearby? And they're going through those things. So how would you say that you've been able to balance the clinical approach partnered with faith?
Yeah. So balancing those two, I would definitely say one, God is the first thing that we bring up. Like we rationally talk about God, and people need the medical side, but how big is our God that we take those things to Him first
Mm-hmm.
and really analyze what we do need for help? Because there are times where we're called for medical evaluation or we're called for medicine, and praise the Lord that we live in situations where that's possible. And then
Right.
there are other times where it is a true issue of repenting and believing the gospel and needing life change. And so, really, it's bringing it to God first and analyzing what we need to do. And I will say this, and I think I learned this a lot from my disease in the generation, like you said, of mental health issues, or anybody that's struggling with mental health,
Right. Right.
even an emotion,
Yep.
we live in like this daily distraction. Like we get up, we go to work or we go to school, we come home, and sometimes it's something technological, sometimes it's something extracurricular, event based, that just makes us busy a lot, and we kind of run a circle a little bit sometimes. And I think we lose focus that we are living in this awesome New Testament time that the Bible described.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is all this the day-to-day life that you're living is only a part of it. Like this is like 50%. There's a whole nother spiritual side of this world. You're living in the New Testament. like
Yeah.
Jesus is alive, he's real, he's with you. I mean, there are all
Heaven
these
on
incredible
earth.
perspectives,
Yeah.
heaven on earth, these
Yeah.
perspectives that we've just forgotten. And so when it comes to mental health, I think perspective shift is a huge one in the first step of admitting what our problem is, taking it to God. Okay, I need medical help, or I need the spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
And so that is one huge thing. It is a reality check when you really realize what we get to live in every single day and the promise that the Bible has for us that we are stepping into that. Um,
It's
that
surreal.
is what I say was huge. It's
Yeah, it
so real.
definitely changes things because I know when the Lord's put, vision or dreams in my life, as far not even just like sleeping dreams, which
Yeah.
there's those too, but just like vision for my life. It's crazy to think that like we have access to God that's so much bigger than even the miracles we've already experienced.
Yeah.
And thinking about like with unveiled faces, we go from glory to glory in the image of Christ. Like that's wild to think about.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you really just sit back and kind of go, whoa, like of course it's fun to wake up and, pursue your career dreams. Of course it's fun to, get married and have kids and have friends and go play sports. Like those are all really good gifts that God gives
Yes.
us. And they're not to be shuffled to the side for the sake of being overly spiritual.
True.
But when it does come to what you're saying of like, we're living in the time where like the Holy Spirit has been poured out to us as a down payment, knowing that Christ is coming back, that is like, it makes the things we're doing here on earth that much richer.
Yes.
It makes the progress we're making with our mental health or the progress we're making with our careers and the stepping stones and going to school and all the fun things that God's given us to enjoy in this life, it makes it that much richer. And so, if you were to have, and I said this the other day, let's say it was Christmas time and your parents were going to give you a ton of gifts, but they're like, hey, I'm not going to be there. And you just sat by yourself on Christmas morning and opened them and you were by yourself. Would the gift mean as much?
No, it'd be weird.
It'd be weird. You'd be like, I wish my parents were here. The part of the joy of the gift is being with the giver of the gift. Yes. And that's the same thing with our Heavenly Father is he gives good gifts and there are fun things here on this side of heaven. It's not supposed to be miserable and biding our time until we get to heaven, but we are part of something so much greater. And that's what I always get sad about. People miss about the Great Commission is he gives us the Great Commission of go into all the world and preach the gospel. But after that, he says, I will be with you to the end of the age. That's the great part, right? It's this, wow, I get to be a part of something and partnered in an adventure with him, but he'll be with me to the end, to the very, very end. Yeah. And guess what? At the end, it's still not the end because we're going to be with him forever. And so I'm totally with you on that, where it's a good perspective. It's a good balance to have is to take it to the Lord and say, hey, like if it's medical help I need, you'll provide it for me. You'll open the right doors for me. You'll bring I even think about some of the doctors and counselors I had in my life. I couldn't have even Googled them because I just wouldn't know where to start, And so he's faithful to do that. But also what you're saying is there are certain things in our life that we've partnered with strongholds in our life that will inadvertently make you anxious, will make you depressed, will make you confused. And so, when you come to the Lord in that, he says we can come to the Lord boldly to his throne and ask for mercy in our time of need. So you don't have to be afraid to bring your sin to him. You can be like, hey, this is what I've partnered with. He's not going to strike you down at all. Exactly. He wants to give you mercy and grace in your time of need. And so such a beautiful thing. Josh, your story is incredible. At the end of each episode, I like to ask each guest what one of their favorite qualities about the Lord is. I know there's a ton.
Favorite qualities about the Lord. I will say tangible. And can I, people can hear this part and they can think it's weird if you want. But I have this thing where I try to eat one meal a day alone, whether it's like lunch or if I don't eat breakfast or whatever. And one of the cool things to do is you'll get like a whole another extra plate and a whole another extra chair, and you just sit it there, and you try to visually picture God and act like you are sitting there talking with the physical Jesus right beside you, because in reality, he's there with you. So it's such like a cool, like it is tangible God. He's not left. He's right there with you. And he's just pouring out love. And so I think it's an incredible thing, how tangible and how real. You can feel God. You start trying to image him. You can feel him. That's kind of cool.
I love that. That is cool. And for our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated, that is something that you guys can do as well. He's with you always. His love knows no bounds. He's next to you. He's encircled around you. He sings songs over you. And that is the God that we serve. And it's just wild to think about. And again, if you just sit there and kind of ponder about how good our God is and how tangible he is and how he is eager to love on us, that's a really cool exercise that you do to get your mind in a place where you remember that he is here physically. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us on the Victorious Living podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you today.
Oh, and thank you so much once again.
Thank you for listening to Victorious Living Podcast. Did you know that you can help incarcerated men and women experience victorious living? Visit victoriouslivingmagazine.com to find out more information. Are you an inmate in prison who needs encouragement? Write to us at Victorious Living, P.O. Box 2751, Greenville, North Carolina 27836. Every inmate who writes to us from prison receives personal correspondence from our team, quarterly devotions, as well as their own quarterly subscription to Victorious Living magazine.